If we experience an emotion and the nervous system cannot process it, parent yells or something like, oh my God, that was bad, that was wrong, happens, that scalar wave of an emotion that's supposed to go through you freezes and forms a shape in the fascia in our skin. Then it stays stuck in you and you just project in every different vertical of your life, friendship, relationship, business, a flavor of this emotion. It will repeat until...
What looked like rock bottom, dislocating his shoulder, going bankrupt and losing his booming beverage business in America led him to his true calling. Today's guest is a master in nervous system regulation and HRV, a deep thinker, and a man that helps high achievers all around the world crack the code to health and true fulfillment. Our guest today is Salim Najjar. I'd love to hear a bit about this pivotal moment for you when your mind realized this. That's when things started to change.
My grandma got diagnosed with cancer. It was the first time that I actually was able to process my dad's passing and think about it and be like, man, everybody I know is impacted by cancer. What is going on here? And so I use my curiosity, my engineering mind, to do my own research. If we are in a mind-made beta state, meaning chronic stress, then that oxygen isn't going to our organs, which is what leads to aging, disease, and eventually death. So when I read HRVs related to stress, I started just going down a rabbit hole of HRV 6 years ago, realizing, oh my God, why do I even care about any other biomarker, anything else? I need to focus on this one if I actually believe the science.
If they're looking at this HRV score, what does it actually mean?
So
I think we start this with a big deep breath.
Okay.
And then just we roll straight in because that breath work was great. Let's close it all out with one big.
Yeah, that's nice.
I have a massive book of questions that I have prepared and thought about, but I'm going to be completely honest that I think everything on this book right here is going to be surface level comparatively to what we're actually going to dive into. So my promise to you is I'm going to listen and then off the back of that, we're going to have some amazing things and hopefully come up with some really profound stuff. But Salim, welcome to the show.
Chris, thank you so much for having me. Truly pleasure.
You said on another podcast, we are grown-ups living in this meat suit, reliving the imprinted traumas of our childhood. What does that mean?
Oh, that's where we're going to start. There's a lot in there, and I want to preface it by saying I got that from an incredible book, The Body Keeps Score, which very much talks about how so much of our programming is imprinted from our formative years, those ages between 2 and 7, which correlate when your brain is oscillating in theta. And theta is one of the 3 states in the parasympathetic state of the autonomic nervous system, which I feel like we're going to be diving into greatly. But essentially, high level, what that means is that I believe I call it, we live in this educational simulation, and we are projecting things that are inside of us. As many brilliant people have said, your outer world is a reflection of the inner world. And most of our inner world stuck emotions come from those formative years when we were a child. So high level, that's what that means.
What ages?
The formative years are 2 through 7, where the most imprints happen, because that's when your brain is oscillating between 4 and 8 hertz, that theta state. And if you want, we could kind of go into what that actually means on a nervous system level and the different phases.
Let's go there.
Let's go there. Okay. So one of the most intricate systems that we know so little about, the autonomic nervous system, known as ANS, right? Have you talked about it on a podcast in the past?
I have not, no.
Man, it is responsible for governing 90% of all of our voluntary and involuntary functions, including breath, which we just did a beautiful breath work, your heart, your digestion, all these things that are happening in the background are governed by the autonomic nervous system, which is an electrical system. This system operates in 2 primary states: the sympathetic state, which is synonymous with fight or flight, and the parasympathetic state, which is synonymous with the rest and digest state. Each of these states also correlate with frequencies your brain is oscillating. So first, let's start with the parasympathetic rest and digest state. That correlates with 3 frequencies: delta, theta, and alpha. Delta is sleep state, where your brain is oscillating between 0.5 and 4 hertz, and you are getting your deepest parasympathetic state of recovery, relaxation. Sleep is the only thing evolution hasn't gotten rid of in any species, and evolution doesn't make mistakes, right? Each of these states also correlate with our ages through our developmental years. So when a baby is born and when you come out the womb, your brain is oscillating in delta, meaning you are asleep. And if you notice, a baby really can't follow. Their eyes are awake, but they don't see what we see. They actually just see light because the foundation of their nervous system is being built in that first year. It's in delta, right? So important to be attuned to the energies around the baby because they feel everything.
Right. So they're in the delta state.
Between ages 0 and like 1 year, they say that's that delta state.
And then you said it progresses to theta?
So then the next state in the parasympathetic is theta, which is where your brain oscillates between 4 and 8 hertz. The theta state is known as the meditative, hypnotic, between conscious and unconscious, where you can get into in a breath work, in a meditation, in a sound bath, right? Where you're kind of here, you're kind of not here, you're lost. This state is a very hypnotic, susceptible state because your brain is oscillating between 4 and 8 hertz. And this state correlates with the formative years because they quite literally form us, right? Formative. And so that's between ages of 2 and 7. And why these years are so important, and they talk about this in The Body Keeps Score, is because during those years, you don't have an analytical mind. Your frontal cortex is not made, and you are a sponge to everything that is happening around you because you accept reality as it is, including the reactions of other people, right? So much of our traumas or our stuck emotions happen in this formative years because you don't have an analytical mind to actually discern anything for yourself, right? Then the last state in the parasympathetic is alpha, which is known as the flow state, right? An athlete in their flow when you're running. It's essentially, the monkey mind is very quiet. You're awake and alert, but you're focused on one thing, very, very present to the one thing, right? And that correlates between 8 and 14 hertz. And that's your toddler years between ages 7 and 14, which is why we send kids to school. You learn so much because your analytical mind is being formed, right? All those neural pathways are being formed, and you don't have the monkey mind going on thinking a million things. It's also why commercials work so well. When you watch TV, your mind is shut off. You're literally focused on the one thing, right? And then 12 minutes in, they throw a commercial. You best believe you are getting all the emotions. Everything is going to be retained in you because your brain is in that alpha state.
We'll interrupt the show just for 1 minute to talk about No, I'm joking. And so what's the monkey mind? You're referencing that.
The monkey mind, some people refer to as an ego. Other people refer to, just all the chatter that's constantly happening in any human at all times. And that's very strong in the sympathetic state, which is synonymous with the beta brainwave, where your brain is oscillating between 14 and 30 hertz, right? And I think it's super important for people to understand how we as humans evolved creating this sympathetic state. Because evolution, again, doesn't make mistakes. And for me to really get to this place where I have the utmost passion in nervous system regulation, and specifically through HRV, which we'll get into, I needed to understand what is actually happening physiologically inside of me when I'm stressed, right? What is happening to all those organs that I mentioned that are governed by the autonomic nervous system? And so for most of human evolution, we lived in the jungle, right? We did not have the luxury of houses, of safety, of all these things. And while we were living in the jungle, there were real life threats, right? Like tigers or weather or whatever it is that could actually kill us. And so our bodies so brilliantly developed this sympathetic state to survive. And so let's break down what's happening physiologically when your body goes into the sympathetic, high beta stressful state. Your amygdala fires off, screaming that it's in danger, and all of your organs start to react in a way to support for survival. So your eyes dilate to allow more light to come in so you could be more alert. Your saliva production decreases, which people think, oh, that's not a big deal. Actually, all your nutrient absorption, massively important for saliva to be producing normally. And if not, it leads to tooth decay, gingivitis, cavities, which makes sense why when we look at skulls of our ancestors, their teeth were so perfect, right? Nowadays, our teeth are not so perfect. Your heart increases to send more blood for alertness. Your digestion takes a total back seat, and all the vital oxygen that's normally going into your visceral organs go to your extremities to support running or fighting or freezing, right? So all these things are happening internally when the amygdala is firing off, thinking that there's danger, which is so brilliant if you're being chased by a tiger, right? You need it to survive. But after about an hour or two, you survive the thing, and then you drop your body back into a parasympathetic state. If you've ever been on a safari in the jungle, the most ferocious animals, lions, 95% of the time are sunbathing. They're in a parasympathetic state or sleeping, right? Because we're meant to be in balance in both. Fast forward to today, we wake up from our deepest parasympathetic state of delta. We usually look at our phone, we go to work, and instantly stay in a mind-made high beta state, usually for most of the day, if not all the day, until we go back to sleep. And so what is happening internally when we're in this state? All of that vital oxygen going to the visceral organs are going to our extremities, and our organs cannot do what they're meant to do, which is recover, heal, absorb the nutrients. And that is why on a cellular level, the number one cause of inflammation to our cells is chronic stress. And the root cause to every disease, aging, and eventually death is inflammation to our cells. Unless you die in an accident, the root cause of whatever it is that gets you to age is inflammation to our cells, because our body is the most miraculous temple that can heal itself if it's allowed to do what it normally needs to do. If the autonomic nervous system is in a balanced state and all of the vital oxygen can go to support digestion, to support breathing, right? However, if we are in a mind-made beta state for a long time, meaning chronic stress, then that oxygen isn't going to our organs. And over time, the inflammation begins on the cellular level, which is what leads to aging, disease, and eventually death. And so when my mind realized that, oh, wow, all this stuff is happening inside because I'm in a stressful state that my mind is creating, I need to pause and be in control or have some agency to when I'm in a triggered limbic, back of the brain, sympathetic state, so that I could control this if I actually care about longevity and health, right?
Yeah. I want to dive into the chronic stress piece and how important that is and how much of a focus that is with your work and regulating the central nervous system. But I think before doing all of that, let's go back to Salim and younger Salim, and just so we can get an idea on who you were growing up. And then I'd love to hear a bit about this pivotal moment for you where you just said when your mind realized this, that's when things started to change. But let's go back to little Salim.
Yeah, little Salim. Little Salim is first generation Lebanese, was born in upstate New York. I'm the oldest of three, and my father passed away when I was 7 from cancer, which very much profoundly shaped a lot of the patterning, because that's the formative years, right? He was diagnosed when I was 4 and slowly decayed because of chemo for 3 years until he passed. So much of my little Salim programming came from those formative years, right? Of sacrifice, of needing to support. I went to school for engineering. I graduated with a dual engineering degree of computer systems and electrical engineering. And I worked at a nuclear power plant when I got out of college for 5.5 years. And it was at that time when I graduated that my grandma, who was my second mom, got diagnosed with cancer. And it was the first time that I actually was able to process my dad's passing and think about it and be like, man, everybody I know is impacted or knows someone impacted by cancer. What is going on here? And so I used my curiosity, my engineering mind, to do my own research. And I came across this Dr. Tullio Simoncelli, who has supported so many cancer patients with baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, which is a natural alkalizer, because he believes that cancer cannot thrive in an alkaline, oxygen-rich environment. And most of us, especially in the West, with our processed food diet, are very acidic, right? And so for me, seeing the testimonials of people he supported through cancer was the first time my mind was like, oh, wow, we see what people want us to see. And there's so much more out there that we need to just go and experience and learn ourselves. So it was the beginning of my, I'd say, like health journey was that, and that got me into a lot of weird things, baking soda, hydrogen peroxide, copper, iodine, going down all these rabbit holes, and especially with my diet. And I first, elimination diet, I tried vegan for 2 weeks. I loved how I felt from essentially cutting out the crappy foods, right? But I wasn't happy. Tried vegetarian for about a month. And then I landed on pescatarian for 4.5 years. Very happy with the energy. And then my body started craving meat about 13 years ago. And that's when I came across ketosis or keto, which I believe the industry has now ruined. But when I read about it 13 years ago, something just clicked. I was like, oh, if I cut out carbs and sugar, My body will then start to burn fat for energy. My brain is made of fat. That's incredible rocket fuel. Let's see how it goes. And I became obsessed with the energy, with the clarity. It was like just a whole nother level. And so I tend to do things very extremely. I went to the extreme side of keto, cutting out all sugars. And the number one consumption of sugar in America is beverages. So I would only drink water and unsweetened tea. And it was a colleague of mine at the nuclear power plant who we drink our yerba mate together. And he loved bubbles. And he came up with this brilliant idea to brew up some mate. He bought a soda stream. He cooled it. He sparkled it, blasted it with CO2, and came up with the first sparkling tea. And he brought it in for me to try. And I so vividly remember being in the cubicle and taking this sip. I say love at first sip. And I was like, this is it. Because I was looking to get out of corporate America. I had started investing in real estate. I was getting my MBA, but I needed something I was passionate and excited about to go and chase. And this just aligned with all of my values. So now 11 years ago, we launched the first organic, sparkling, unsweetened tea company in America called Sound. And it's sound as an adjective, sound body, sound mind, sound ingredients, sound mission. Really, our goal was to bring education and awareness and transparency into the beverage space specifically, because there's just none. People are drinking. They don't even know how much sugar is in, but then also the natural sweeteners, the artificial sweeteners, all these things that you don't know what you're putting in the most sacred vessel. And so we launched that 11 years ago, and that coincided with the biohacking movement, right? With Dave Asprey and Ben Greenfield. And so I quit the power plant job, me and my co-founder. I moved to New York City, and I became obsessed with biohacking, all things, to the point where I literally was living in New York City, showing off. I was hacking my way to 5 hours of sleep, running 10 miles every other day, listening to about 2 to 3 audible books a week while I was running, right? Raising money from over 170 people, getting this beverage company up in arguably the hardest city to do so, New York City, right? And there I am thinking, oh, I'm winning, going, looked like physically fit, all the things, was having my bulletproof, doing 1 meal a day, every kind of extreme thing, you name it, I was trying. And I did that for 5 years. And after 5 years, my body so beautifully broke down with my knee going out from running that much, because we're not meant to run, especially on like hard pavement, or I was running in Central Park. And I was so addicted to the endorphin release from sweating that I needed to find another way to sweat. And that's when I came across Bikram yoga. And it was the first time my mind was forced to shut up for 90 minutes in this like hot room. And it was the beginning, I would say, of the inward journey. And I somehow got the book, Dr. Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural, at that time. And oh my, that changed everything for me, because he so beautifully breaks down physiologically what is happening in your body and chakras and third eye pineal gland in a scientific way that my analytical mind loved, right? And so I would enjoy every day meditating for at least an hour, and my eyes closed more than open in New York City, just because I was like, oh, the chakras, the lights, all these, it's just like started a journey that I don't even know how it landed in my lap, right? And I also read, after Dr. Joe Dispenza's Becoming Supernatural, Celestine Prophecy, which is one of my favorite books. I highly recommend. I've gifted it to over 100 people, because it's a fiction book, but it's not really a fiction book. And they talk about Machu Picchu and everything that happened down there. And it got me to go to Machu Picchu, and also got me to go do a Vipassana after down in Machu Picchu. And that was really the deep dive in my inward journey. And the last thing I'll say about that is, it was Dr. Joe Dispenza's book in the beginning of it, Becoming Supernatural, where he mentions HRV. The first time I saw it in literature, and he mentioned it relating to stress. And at that time, Aura had just launched, maybe 6 months prior to that. I had my ring, and like all biohackers, I was obsessed with the data, right? Obsessed with my sleep score, obsessed with my readiness score. But HRV was there. Nobody was talking about it 6 years ago. Nobody, just another thing there, right? But when I read in his book that it relates to stress, I knew from all of my research and all the biohacking that I had done, because if I do something, the engineer in me needs to understand it and then experience it myself. And it was with this company, actually, Nucalm, Nucalm, one of my favorite technologies. They have a patent guaranteed to get your body in a parasympathetic state through binaural beats, which is essentially taking two different frequencies in each ear, and your brain gets confused and chases the delta. So if you put 16 hertz in one ear, 10 hertz in another ear, your brain will go to 6 hertz, which is that theta state. And for someone who had a very busy, heavy monkey mind, being an entrepreneur, it was a way to gently guide me in the middle of the day to that state. And I knew from all my research with that company that on a cellular level, inflammation is the root cause of everything. And the number one cause of inflammation on a cellular level is chronic stress. So when I read HRVs related to stress, I started just going down a rabbit hole of HRV 6 years ago, realizing, oh my God, heart rate variability, that gap or variance between each of your heartbeats indicates how your heart is perceiving its changing environment. So it's essentially your relationship to your stress in a direct reflection of the health of your autonomic nervous system and its agility to go from a sympathetic fight or flight state into a parasympathetic rest and digest state. So when my mind got that click, it was like, why do I even care about any other biomarker or anything else? I need to focus on this one if I actually believe the science that the root cause of all aging, disease, and death is chronic stress. Let me find a way to figure out how to optimize this metric. And that's, yeah.
It's so cool to see the progression and where one thing leads to another. It's kind of like a lot of people's journeys where there's a gateway and then they open that gateway into one thing and then it leads them down this next path. And then you blink and you're 10 years down the line or 5 years down the line or a year down the line and things are completely changed in your life in a different way. But you mentioned earlier on in that message about your dad having cancer when you were 4 till 7 when he passed away. And then you mentioned during that time, obviously it was a very informative, transformative time of your life, that age. How, like in reflection, when you're looking back, how did that impact you as a young kid, and how has that shaped you into who you are today? And is there any key messages or lessons that you've learned in looking back at those times? Hey, it is Monday morning and you know what that means. It means I just received my Papa Macros delivery for the week, and Papa Macros has been an absolute game changer, and let me tell you why. I've just increased this show to 2 episodes every single week. So to put into context, we're releasing a cinema production with a new guest every 3 days, and I'm still training every single day and striving towards marathons and high rocks prep. So to stay on top of my health and fitness whilst fitting in this busy schedule that I have, Papa Macros has been a game changer for me because it's allowing me to have nutritious, delicious, and more importantly, convenient meals at my doorstep every week so I can stay on top of my health and also achieve all the goals that I'm striving towards. If you guys are time poor or you want to get on top of your health and fitness, Papa Macros is going to be a game changer for you as well. So you can go to the link in the description or the show notes below, or go to papamacros.com.au and you can use code Chris Griffin and you'll get 10% off for life on any Papa Macros order that you make. Once again, go to link in the description below and use code Chris Griffin for 10% off your entire order. Stay on top of your health and use Papa Macros today. Let's get right back to the show. Is there any key messages or lessons that you've learned in looking back at those times?
Oh my God, so many. I think how it shaped me is it imprinted what I would say I call my core program, my master program or my core wound of this belief that I receive love via doing, via sacrificing, via supporting, right? Because especially most cultures, but especially Lebanese, the oldest male, there's a lot of ownership on them, especially if the father passes at a very young age. So I was the caretaker. I was told, I wasn't actually, and my mom wasn't like, oh, you need to do this, but just our culture in general very much put this ownership of me needing to sacrifice and ensure that my younger brother, my younger sister, my mom were all taken care of. And so the beauty of that is that was the drive that got me to be an entrepreneur, to go to engineering school, to do all these things. Because in the back of my mind, I was doing it for them, right?
Right. So do you have any other siblings?
I have a younger sister and brother.
Okay. And in reflection, and when you look at the family, do you think that your younger sister and brother were affected in a different way than you from that?
Oh yeah, all of us in our own unique way for sure. And we've talked about it.
Yeah, wow. See, it's cool to be able to look back at it, because obviously losing your dad at such a young age is not a thing a lot of people would go through. I mean, most people don't, fortunately. But when you're looking at those times, like obviously you're young and you don't really know, like you wouldn't really know exactly what's going on, right, in those moments. It doesn't really, it kind of takes hindsight to look back and reflect on how you're actually coping with it. But is there any memories you have from those younger times?
So many memories, so many, I would say, beautiful ones, so many, traumatic ones. But I think the thing I feel called to share is, that book I mentioned, Celestine Prophecy. I read it when I was 33. And I had thought at the time I had done a lot of work to, accept my father's passing, to come to terms with it, all the things. And when I'm reading this book, it talks about like 9 insights that govern this energetic simulation that we live in. The first insight is there's no such thing as coincidences. There's actually synchronicities happening in every moment if you're open and aware of them, right? Which I love. But another insight, and I remember reading it at night, was your soul chooses your parents based on your purpose, right? They choose based on what you came here to do, who will be the best teachers for that. And when I read that, I was so pissed. I threw down the book. I was like, why would I choose a father that was going to pass when I'm 7? All I ever wanted growing up was a male role model, was a dad, right? This makes no sense. And I threw the book down. I was very upset. And then I got up the next morning, and in my morning practice, I meditated and I contemplated that. It's like, why would I choose that? And when I was able to, outside of the limbic sympathetic state, look at a macro view of my world, I started to realize that, my father, brilliant PhD chemical engineering. If you Google him, so many patents in his name, right? Intellectual. My mom would say that he could sell air to a human. Incredibly intelligent, charismatic human. And had his own traumas growing up and was the oldest male in his family and in our culture, right? We Lebanese are very stubborn and very, again, patriarchal, masculine dominant, right? And I look at other families and kids who are grown up in an energy of that strong masculine, it gets passed on. That's why it's still here. It's very hard to break that generational belief if you are in that energy of such a strong, potent masculine, right? And I was only in that energy for 7 years. Then I was raised from 7 on by my mom and my grandma, by 2 feminine energies, right? And I realized that I would not be remotely close to the human that I am. And I'm not saying for better or for worse, but just who I am today, if I had my dad in my life the entire time. Instead, I got a lot more sensitive and in touch with the feminine in a different perspective. And I got all of his gifts, and I still talk to him every morning. And he's now helping me even more so on the other side. And it allowed me to not only accept his death when I read this and meditated on it, but appreciate its purpose in my life. Right?
How are you still talking to him?
Oh, every morning, part of my practice, I always connect with my ancestors, with my mentors, and he still divinely guides me. I call them truth bumps at times when I think of him and just the ways that he has helped and supported. Yeah.
So you mentioned your soul chooses your parents in that book. What does that mean? I struggle to understand.
Yeah, I highly recommend reading the book. This is just a truth that I prescribe to, but essentially I believe, first off, I believe we all come from the same place and go back to the same place, whatever you want to call that, God, love, consciousness, Allah. And as we incarnate in this body, in this vessel, right, we come here to learn. That's why I call it an educational simulation. And so we have our purpose. Our soul knows our purpose when we come in. And based on who will be the best medicine, who will be the best teachers, and allowing us to embody that purpose, we pick those parents, which means also who's going to be the biggest triggers, right? Because you learn through hermetic stress, through actually challenge is where all growth comes from. And if you look at anybody, your greatest wound led to your superpower, right? Your greatest strength is always, if you swing the pendulum, your biggest weakness. So you're always swinging between 2 polarities in this dualistic reality that we co-create.
So the thing about this though is, I mean, I guess because you're saying we come from the same place and we go back to the same place. how can one that comes in later control what was in there already? Like you're saying, how can my soul choose my parents who have already been here longer? That's what the way my brain is processing.
Totally. And that's a beautiful way to process. And that's a belief that your parents are actually, what's the best way to put this? Physically, like real. And this goes to, we talked about it a bit at dinner, but the observer effect or the double slit experiment, where the reality is it's been proven by quantum science that what we perceive is all just energy in an empty space that we are creating with our attention, right? And so there is no time is a funny thing, and it is not linear. And all that ever is, and if you've read the books like Power of Now and all these things, the only thing there ever actually is this present moment that we're in. And everything else is just a story that we are creating and has been created from generations past. And it's our relationship to that story that defines it.
Okay, so there's no time.
We make time, in my belief. Time is, if you were to think of the beautiful image, is a tazaracted cube. I don't know if you've ever seen a cube tazaracted, which is like a cube within a cube. And so the cube is going through the cube. It's connected to all sides, and it kind of goes in, and as it goes through it, and the cube goes back. And it's like this thing that keeps on going. So you're always connected to your past and your future, but there's only ever the now. And I think the perfect visual I've ever seen of time, have you seen Interstellar?
No, I've not.
Oh,
actually, yes, I have, with Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you remember when he goes in the black hole?
No.
He goes in the black hole and he falls, and it's like a trillion versions of this one scene of the bookshelf that and he sees his daughter in the bookshelf, but it's literally falling, and it's a trillion stacked dimensions of time, because I believe time is fractally stacked. So in other words, in this moment right now of you and I sitting recording this podcast, there is a trillion versions of this happening that, depending on what we say, we could go into each one based on our intention and our frequency to get to it. But it's all already happening.
Okay. So this is an interesting concept to talk about, because I took my dad out for dinner the other day, and he brought up this concept around he doesn't think there's time, and I was going in this rabbit. He loves Eckhart Tolle and the Power of Now, and he was talking about this concept, and I was kind of really trying to come to a conclusion here, because living in a human society and disregarding time is quite a hard thing, because it's such a key metric in our life that we use to plan things, project things, and kind of navigate life in a sense. It's a very, very key metric. So if a human society was to eliminate that from their life, what would life look like? Can you operate in a society that it is like today without time?
Well, it's not about disregarding time, and that's never was said. It's simply about your relationship to it. Right. So by no means do I think time is not a good thing and is not here and is creating this beautiful, magical place we're in, but just what is your relationship to it? And that's honestly my answer to almost everything. And HRV is a reflection of your relationship to your reality.
So when you say what is your relationship to time, what does that mean?
Yeah. So is your relationship to time one of like, oh my God, I'm going to die, I'm running out of time, I need to do all these other things? Or is your relationship to time, like, is it stressing you out? Is it causing more harm than it is good for you, right? Because I think it's beautiful to have a goal, have an idea, have a plan to actually do. We all came here to do, right? It's not about not doing and just sitting back and just letting time pass. It's about what is your intention in your doing. So it's all about your relationship, and why you are using time, in my opinion, is more important.
That's a very good distinction to make.
Yeah.
Because if you're using time as a metric to increase stress in your life, that's not an advantageous thing to be doing.
And so beautifully said. And most of us are operating on a program that was created in our mind from a prior version of us that is using time based on that versus what is most aligned for us in this moment.
Right. So a prior version of us.
Yeah. So I think we need to break down a bit what energetically is happening in this educational simulation. Anytime we have a perceived trigger, a perceived stress, a challenge, if there's something happening outside of us, if you were to map out your body, beneath that, there is always an emotion or multiple emotions connected to what you're seeing, what you're projected. And directly connected to that emotion is a physical sensation that's in our body. And if you peel the onion one layer deeper on a quantum level, because I've gotten all sciencey and geeky in this, an emotion is simply a scalar wave of energy, right? And there is no such thing as a good or bad emotion. As humans, we are meant to feel every emotion on the spectrum. And as Dr. Joe says, feel it for about 90 seconds until that wave moves through us. And then that's it, it goes through you. However, if we experience an emotion and the nervous system cannot process it, or more often than not, in the formative years, when we don't have an analytical mind to process ourselves, and a parent yells or something like, it seems like energetically, oh my God, that was bad, that was wrong, happens, that scalar wave of an emotion that's supposed to go through you freezes. You could think of it like a glacier, and forms a shape in the fascia in our skin. And so we have all these stuck, frozen emotions in our body from our life, if you believe in past life, from past lives, that we are simply projecting out in front of us to feel. And the best analogy I can give to that, the number one fear in humans, this is known, is public speaking over death. And I had that. I had a big fear of that. And I used to talk in public or get on stage and I get these knots in my stomach. And I used to think that the knots came because I'm on the stage. But the reality is I co-created this stage that I'm on to feel the stuck, frozen emotion in my stomach that I am labeling with my mind as an uncomfortable knot.
I haven't revisited this topic and resurfaced this in a while about the emotions only lasting 90 seconds in the body. Mm-hmm. So the way I envisioned it was an emotion can only stay in your body for 90 seconds. And please correct me if I'm ever wrong in this. Your emotion can only stay in your body for 90 seconds. But what happens is if an emotion prolongs longer than 90 seconds, what you're doing is you're forming a new emotion at the end of the 90 seconds, but it's basically like similar. It's like in the similar field. So you're saying like, because we're storing it, the emotion's flowing through us, but then we're forming a new emotion on the same thing?
Almost. So what I'm saying is an emotion, as Dr. Joe says, is just energy in motion.
Yeah, you said, energy, emotion is energy in motion.
Emotion is energy in motion. And again, all it wants to do is move. If for some reason it doesn't move through you because you're feeling it for longer than 90 seconds or you don't know how to process it, that scalar wave of an emotion freezes. It doesn't move through you. So that actual emotion forms a shape in your body. And the best example I could give to this, animals we can learn so much from. And there's this video online of a deer eating grass on the side of a road. And all of a sudden a car clips the deer, right? And the video stays on the deer falls down, it looks like it's dead. But after 2 minutes, the deer gets up, it kind of does it's called tremoring. It kind of shakes around and you'd think the deer would run. The deer just goes right back to eating grass in the same place like nothing ever happened, because that shaking, that tremoring was them moving that emotion, that traumatic experience out of them, and then it never happened. They don't stick with the story. But what we do is we get so attached to the story of our emotion, and by creating a relationship of this story to it, it stops it from doing all it wants to do, which is move through you. So all the emotion ever wants is to be felt. And it just needs to be felt for 90 seconds and then it'll move through. But if you don't give it that chance because you're too scared or it's uncomfortable or you're in your formative years and you don't know how to, then it stays stuck in you and you just project in every different vertical of your life, friendship, relationship, business, a flavor of this emotion. It will repeat until you feel it.
So the way to, if we've got these freezers in our body, do we need to access our theta state to be able to get them, or is it the accessing that to be able to identify there is a freeze, and then in the integration off the back of that, which is what state are we in when we can actually feel the emotion?
Great question. Being in the theta state is a much easier way to access and feel that emotion, because if you're in your sympathetic beta limbic state, it is literally the most reptilian back of the brain. It's your limbic survivor mechanism, right? That state was created for us to survive. I liken it to an analogy of hospitals in Florida They have this fail switch because of tornadoes and hurricanes, that if one's coming, they hit a button and all the metal shades go on so the glass doesn't go in or hurt anybody. Brilliant program put in place to save people, right? What happens if there's a shooter in the building and they hit that button? It's actually doing the opposite. But the program doesn't know any different. It was birthed from a place of brilliance. Our minds are programs. Once we are in this limbic state, we cannot access the frontal cortex, and anything we've ever learned, we only know on or off. And so we are running on a prior version because this emotion is still stuck. So in order to actually feel it, one, we need to get out of that state. So in an alpha, in a theta, in a delta state. And then from that state, bring awareness and curiosity to it to move. And what that looks like is so different for so many people to move emotions. It could be actual movement, dancing, running, working out. I do somatic practice, which is essentially feeling and physically describing the sensation in your body. So many different ways to get it to move, but it needs to be felt and moved through. And my favorite analogy to give to this, and again, why I call it an educational simulation, because I've made it a game in my mind. It's the game Super Mario, which at the end of every level of Super Mario, the music will get a little scary because the big bad Bowser's coming, right? And all you ever had to do to defeat Bowser and get on the other side is either hit him 3 times or jump on him 3 times. And no matter what, there was some good music, a flag, sometimes a princess, and a level up, right? And you could try 100 times and die. You had 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000 lives to try. But in order to level up, you had to go through Bowser. This educational simulation is not much different. There's big Bowsers, little Bowsers, all these different stresses, challenges that come. The only way to level up is to actually go through it, to feel it, to allow that frozen scalar wave of an emotion to be felt and not judged and projected as bad or this or whatever. Don't put it in a box. And then you get to level up.
Yeah. You've mentioned that there's no good or bad. And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, this was from my last mentor, Michaela Grace, who I learned so much from, but she shared this incredible statement that just shifted my perspective. Because again, if HRV is measuring how your heart is perceiving its reality, how do we perceive our reality? Through our senses, right? Through our taste, through our touch, through our sight, through our ears, but most importantly, and most of all, through our thoughts, right? Our thoughts create our reality. So super cognizant of not only what you're saying, but of what you're thinking, because that's what's creating this reality. And so I have learned to be cognizant of the words and the labels and the boxes I create. And if you label something as bad or good, you're putting a box on it. But the reality is this is a very non-linear, ever-changing simulation we live in. So instead of calling something good or bad, or right or wrong, or blue versus red if you're in America, I try to look at everything as frequency and as either dissonant or resonant. And if something is resonant for me right now, doesn't mean it's resonant for you. It actually could be dissonant for you in this moment, and that doesn't make it bad or good for either of us. And if something's resonant for me now, it actually may be dissonant next week. But because I'm not putting a box on it as this is bad, then it allows for the flow if my body changes and it actually becomes resonant or dissonant.
So to access this, we need to be obviously quite self-aware of what's going on in our life, the way we're feeling, the things we're doing, our environment. Do you think the problem is a lot of high achievers are in that fight or flight state and in this extreme stressful, chronic stress state for most of their day, that it's very hard for them to be conscious of all the things that are actually going on that are blocking them, holding them back, making it harder for them to actually have more peace and enjoyment and overall, I guess, happiness in their life? Do you think the problem is that they're just constantly redlining?
Beautiful question.
No problems. This is what you're going to say as well.
You're good. You're good. First off, yes, I don't think it's a problem because it's actually, again, your greatest weakness is your biggest superpower. I was the most guilty of redlining. The most guilty. And by the way, we'll continue the story, but after that first beautiful experience with my body and finding HRV, it took another 5 years for me to realize, yes, I was on the path, but I was still redlining that path, and my body had to scream and smack me even louder to get me to where I currently am. Hopefully I don't redline anymore, but if it happens again, my body will just politely or not so politely get me back on
Course
track.
correct.
Course correct. Yeah. So why, I can just speak from my own experience. I was keeping myself in this chronic stressful state was, I was running on a program of my mind that was like, I need to become financially abundant to support my family, to support my friends, to do all these things. And that was my intention in what I was doing. And I wasn't listening to my body. I was listening to my mind. And the reality is, again, the body is the most sacred temple that is capable of healing itself in any moment if we listen to what is resonant for it. But if we are too much in our minds based on programs and not listening to our body, then over time, the body will speak louder and louder, whether it's a stomach issue, whether it's a sickness, whether it's a physical injury. Anything that actually ever manifests always comes from not listening to the body. And it's the body, like you beautifully said, kindly or not so kindly course correcting to do what is best for it.
Mm. And most people are listening to their mind, not their body.
I was very guilty of listening to the program in my mind instead of listening to what my body wanted. And it's not about not listening to the mind, which the next chapter in my story very much showed me that. It's about befriending the mind and using that superpower for good when it's needed, and then laughing at it the other 90% of the time because it's no longer that younger version that needs or thinks it needs to sacrifice. It's actually that fuel is now still used in my current purpose and passion, right? To bring awareness around the importance of nervous system regulation, HRV, right? So I'm using it, but I'm laughing at it most of the time because I know I don't need to redline to do that. Right?
Yes. We need to befriend our mind.
Yes, befriend and integrate all those versions because again, nothing ever happens by mistake. It's always for you. And that awareness is so valuable to bring compassion because just like the hospital, that switch to get all the medical, brilliant. It was birthed from a brilliant place. And whatever your beautiful mind is doing and addicted to comes from a beautiful place that a younger version of you needed to survive or thought it needed. So we don't want to shun it. We don't want to shame it. We don't want to think it's bad. We just want to contemplate it and see if in this current moment, it's still resonant for you or not. And to your point, the only way you could actually ever do that is to pause and reflect and contemplate and see the story that you are telling yourself, that you are creating every day. But most of us, entrepreneurs especially, get so much in the full-on focus, which is the superpower, that they don't ever pause to be like, why am I even doing this? Like, what is the reason that I'm still doing all these things? It's so funny. I work with some very prolific, successful people that have everything they could have ever imagined and then some, right? But they're not happy. And they don't realize that they're doing all these things and they're in a story. And the whole point was to be there for their family and the kids and all the things. But now the thing that got them all that success is keeping them away from the whole reason they birthed it to start because they're still running on the old program. And until you pause to reflect on that, you're going to stay in the story every single day. And to me, that's when I became obsessed with HRV because another way to think of HRV is it's a reflection of how much are you listening to your body versus listening to your mind, right? Mm. And so it has been a guiding compass for me in what I think is the most important journey. We're here, the one from here to here, right? And for someone who is so analytical, who likes to know, I had a very hard time listening to my body. But when I had a biomarker that's telling me, oh, this is resonant, oh, this is dissonant, and I committed to my health and longevity, I was like, I'm going to listen to whatever it says. And so I was living in New York City, a very heavy drinking city, right? And drinking was a very big part of my growing up, my 20s, living in New York City. And when I committed to honoring what my HRV score was telling me when I started the journey 6 years ago, I'll never forget, I went out my first weekend, had my drinks, came back. I was like, oh, that's no good. Maybe that was a fluke. Let's try that again. Went back the second time. Oh, still not good. Let's try next week. Nope. Okay. I guess it's time for me to stop drinking if I'm actually going to listen to my body. And I share that not to judge drinking. And for some people, it does the opposite. If you have a relationship to drinking that you enjoy. But again, all of this is just energy. So what defines it is your relationship. And I want to, because people are like, oh, but drinking all the things. The best example, an analogy I could give to how much your relationship defines your story. I was in Okinawa last December which is the largest blue zone in the world in Japan, right? So the most centenarians, most people living over 100 in this small town. And we'd get up in the morning, and on the beach, there'd be these 100-year-old Japanese, in community, because community is such an integral part, smoking cigarettes. And my mind is projecting and judging, saying, that cancer stick, how are they living over 100? But the reality is their relationship to the cigarette is not one of poison and cancer. It's one of like community, and their ancestors did it, and it brings them joy and fulfillment. So by no means am I telling people go smoke cigarettes, but I'm simply just giving an example of how much your story and relationship define your reality. And in a world, especially the biohacking community, where we get all this data, we know all these things, and we hear someone else say something and we take that as the standard, the reality is we are all so uniquely individualized based on our upbringings, based on our DNA, based on our epigenetics, based on all these factors. How I perceive the world is very different than how you perceive the world. So that doesn't mean we don't listen to anything, but we should always listen to our body more than anything outside. And for me, HRV was a guiding compass to actually listen to my body and to go explore all the things, which I did, all the biohacks, all the plant medicines, all the Eastern, all the things, to see what resonated most with me.
All right, we're going to get back to speaking to Salim in just a minute. It is early morning here and the sun is rising. If you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, then check the view out. I certainly can't complain working from here, but I need to take a minute to thank our sponsor of the podcast, Whoop. Obviously, in this conversation, Salim is talking a lot about HRV, and one of the main metrics that presents on the Whoop is the HRV, and it seems to be this thing that is so unknown. So hopefully in this conversation, you're having a better understanding on what it actually is. But I use the Whoop to track my HRV and things that can improve my HRV. I change things in my modality so that then I can increase these scores, ultimately resulting in me feeling better. If we don't know the data, we don't know where to improve, and that is where the Whoop comes in. I like to track my deep and restorative sleep, making sure that I'm getting enough rest and recovery so I can attack the day's activities, doing different things in my routines to change my modalities, whether I'm winding down in a different way, whether I'm rising in a different way. All of these things impact the way that I feel, how my HRV reflects, and it's a game changer. So if you guys want to try out Whoop, you can go to join.whoop.com/Chris or hit the link in the description below, and I will actually give you a free band and a free month subscription to Whoop so you can try it out for yourself and understand all of these amazing metrics of your body and how you feel and how you live your life. So go to join.whoop.com/Chris or hit the link in the description or the show notes below and get a Whoop completely free and take your health and fitness to the next level. Let's get right back to this episode. So HRV, I'm kind of getting this understanding that it's the truest metric to be able to determine how you're feeling, how you're seeing the world. And because obviously it's a good indicator for how you're feeling, how your central nervous system is. But I guess what people can do is they might have a habit that is negatively serving them. However, they trick themselves into thinking it's good for you. If they just go, what's good for me is different for you, they can trick themselves into believing it's good because they don't want to quit it. They don't want to cut it off. It might actually be some sort of vice for them, but potentially their HRV would reflect something different to what they're actually thinking. And I want to dive into HRV a little bit, but just before we do that, I want to dive back into this mind concept, because we're talking about mind a lot. And I think the mind, and you're going to say that there's no good or bad in this as well, but the mind can be our best friend and our worst friend. And a lot of the time, if we're subscribing to that, it's like we're having a horrible friend in our ear 24/7, because there's so many days where my alarm goes off in the morning and I really don't want to get out of bed. There's so many days where I have this massive list of to-dos and I'm doing them and I'm questioning why I'm doing every single thing that I'm doing and I don't want to do it and I want to run away. There is times when I'm in a very comfortable state and I should be doing this thing that's uncomfortable. Got to be careful with that. Should be doing something that's really uncomfortable, but then I'm doing this thing that's comfortable and I'm just playing this constant mind battle and it's never on my side at times. But if we can listen to the body, not the mind, it doesn't really matter if the mind's having a good day or a bad day, because you can look further within, take that next step lower into your body and go, okay, how am I actually feeling deep down? Potentially not just doing off feeling, my mind's just processing right now as I'm saying this, but it could be how am I feeling, but then also zooming out a little bit and going like long-term here, like what is the goals? What are the things I'm actually trying to achieve? What is this mission and purpose that I'm set out to achieve on this earth? And are the things that I'm doing getting me closer to that? Are they serving me? And then kind of making your decisions on the premise of that. But mindset with high achievers, I think, can be a battle. There's a quote, and I want to get your thoughts on it, but it's this quote around lazy people do a little work and think they should be winning, but winners work as hard as possible and they're still wondering if they're being lazy. Mm-hmm. And I think this is kind of like wired in a lot of high achieving people and the way they feel like they're working so hard, but they get to the end of the day and they're still like, I've not done enough. Talk to me about mindset.
Yeah. Wow. You said so much profound things there. And I want to circle back to that quote. After I first shared that, you were spot on. The mind is governed by a different law of physics than the body, than the heart. The heart is a magnet, the largest magnet, and it has an electromagnetic field, which some people call our aura field, right? Our auric field. And Dr. David Hawkins proved, he has this book, Power versus Force, this thing called kinesiology. Have you heard of kinesiology? Muscle testing, right? Where literally the body goes weak when presented with something that's dissonant and stays strong when presented something that's resonant. And they've taken the strongest people and someone who has an allergic reaction to like a pea, and they'll put it to his body and literally can't even keep 2 ounces up, right? So that is, the heart cannot lie. It only knows dissonant, resonant. Yes, no, right? The mind not only lies to others, lies to you more than anybody else, because its sole job is to protect its identity, to protect its ego, to protect its program that was put in place at a prior version of you that is solidified in the mind. And if you think of it like a laptop or your iPhone, right? And if you think of the body as the hardware and the mind as the software, sometimes we need to upgrade our iPhones, right? And if we don't upgrade it, what happens? We get a glitch. Well, if you do not get your mind and the program running in your mind in resonance with what your body wants, what happens? You get physical ailments, you get physical injuries. The body will start to course correct so that it is aligned with the hardware of your operating system.
So do you think that knowing that a lot of external physical things that happen to us are a result of the mind?
Oh, my opinion and my truth, and based on my experiences, every physical thing that has ever happened to me, including the quote unquote bad ones, has always been my greatest teachers, and my mind so beautifully, my body so beautifully rather, guiding me into where I needed to be.
Do you have an example of one of those?
Oh yeah, my favorite example, so we could finish my story. So 5 years ago, I started my deep dive into HRV, right? And I said, I'm going to honor and I'm going to listen to whatever helps me improve this metric. And the first year was very much the mind hacking approach. And I didn't get much of a movement. And my baseline at that time was 30. And I defined baseline as your average nightly HRV score over the last 30 days. And then I finally started going inward and experimenting more with the recovery side of biohacking and meditation and yoga and all these other things, and then plant medicines. And all of a sudden, over a 3.5 year period, I saw it go from 30 to 150 to 160 to 170 baseline, right? I saw my highest HRV score ever, average nightly, 2 nights after a profoundly deep ayahuasca ceremony, and it was 244, right? And that's because I had released and moved so much emotion around that core wound of belief of sacrifice for my family, right? And so I was still running the beverage company over those 5 years and raising money from 170 people, and intentionally throughout the day, dropping my body in parasympathetic states via breathwork, cold plunge, sauna, meditation, binaural beats, all these different technologies. I was using it to get out of the monkey mind in the day, drop into a calm state, and then go back into a stress state, because the best way to improve your HRV is hermetic stress, right? Meaning putting your body in perceived stressful situations, turning on your awareness, turning on your agency, and then breathing into a parasympathetic state, letting your body and heart know, oh, it's actually safe, thereby increasing the malleability and resilience of your nervous system to handle more stress. The best analogy for that is when you go work out, you're working out your bicep and you're doing a curl and you're maxing out and you're like, oh, you're actually breaking the muscle fibers when you're pushing it to its max, right? But then what do? You recover and you don't do anything for 2 days to allow the tissues to heal so that you can go and lift more. So that is hermetic stress at its finest, pushing to 101, 103%, and then recovering so that your 100% could be even higher, right? And so I intentionally did that, putting myself in arguably the most perceived stressful situation of a beverage company wildly blowing up and being successful, and thinking that I had it figured out, right? But I was still very much redlining because my intention behind the beverage was still birthed from the place of when it started 5 years ago. And this was now 2 years ago. The beverage company was like number 2 in Whole Foods on the East Coast, opening up in 2,000 retailers. On the outside looked so good. But with that comes a lot of money and capital needed to support it. And the financial landscape, especially in the consumer packaged good industry, was very rough in the US and has been rough. And although I had 170 investors, I didn't have one that could write a big check to keep up with the demand because the demand was so high. And so I was getting myself in a lot of debt, keeping it alive. And I was redlining, trying, because I had such an attachment to the expectation of this needed to work. And I was literally sacrificing, right, my core wound and doing everything I can, because all the people I raised money from too, mind you, my family, my friends, my community. And it was my birthday 2 years ago. And in front of my community, I asked to step into less doing, more being, which is a statement I often hear, especially entrepreneurs redlining, because they're just so exhausted, so chronically stressed. They're like, oh, I want to do less and be more, right? And I got gifted in front of my friends at this birthday a Super 73 electronic bike, which is this incredible Burning Man type bike that I always wanted. And I take said bike for its first spin on the Venice boardwalk, my backyard. The sun is setting. I'm looking around like, wow, what is life? This is just like so beautiful. And I get in the silliest accident that anteriorly dislocates my right shoulder, tears my labrum, and fractures 30% of my shoulder socket off. I couldn't even put my arm down because it was anteriorly dislocated. I had to get rushed to the hospital for them to dislocate it, to relocate it. And I woke up the next morning furious, first off, in immense pain. But then I'm like, how did this happen? And how can I raise money? I don't even have a right shoulder. And like, what was the stories was just spinning. So frustrated. And mind you, my HRV that morning, my baseline was 170. It dropped to 30, right? Which for me, drastic sign that my body is not happy and whatever story I'm telling is not resonant with my body. And I get on a call with my coach at the time, David Burns, and I tell him the story and he breaks out laughing. And I go, what the fuck is so funny? And he goes, let's break down the body spiritually. The arms represent the doing. The torso, the body, represents the being. The shoulder connects the doing to the being. What did you ask for on your birthday? Less doing, more being. What did you get? Exactly what you asked for from the gift in front of everybody that you asked for it. How can you not laugh at the comedy of that? And I just started dying laughing, saying, oh, I get it. I get it now. I will listen. I will listen to you. I will let go of the business. I will stop this pushing this boulder up the rock for 9 years, literally on my shoulders. I will go do what you have been craving so long, to travel. I love to travel, and I was not traveling for literally a decade because I was so committed to this one thing. And 24 hours later, same dislocated shoulder, missing 30% of the socket, my HRV that next morning, 97. Tripled simply from my relationship to the injury happening for me. And that is the power of your mind, even though physically still injured. The whole, I accepted and I was grateful, not fully grateful at that moment, but it took time to get to the full gratitude of the medicine of what my body did by dislocating its shoulder.
Yeah, it's a crazy story to hear, but at the same time, I look at it and go, how can you, there's so much happening in your life, right? You've got team, you've got investors, you've got a company, there's emotional connection there. Obviously you've been doing it for 9 years. And then to be able to hear a coach say a few lines and laugh at you on a call after you've got a dislocated shoulder, and then wake up with a triple HRV and like a massive progression towards being completely fine with the fact that of all this chaos that's just happened in your life. Surely it was such a challenging time for you in that moment. Was it?
Oh my God. You're hearing me on the other side of it. Absolutely. In that moment, in the moments leading up to it, I was working with my coach a lot to feel all aspects and ways it could go. And even after waking up the next morning with that great HRV, it was still continuously challenging because my mind would keep going back to, how am I going to let this go? This is literally $250,000 of my own dollars, over $8 million of friends and all these, like, no, but my body so beautifully made it very clear. And to finish the story, because it just gets even crazier, 2 months after letting it go or trying to see if there's any other way we can, like, somehow keep it alive, we got approached by a holding company who acquires distressed beverages, right? And after 6 months, they put an APA, an asset purchase agreement, which allowed them to start a new company. They purchased the brand and the asset and put it in the new company, convinced them to take our cap table, who owns some of the new company, which is amazing, right? So our investors still own some of this new company. And they only took the debt to our suppliers so they could keep producing. The rest of the debt fell on the company's shoulder, which we dissolved. And I was the guarantor and had most of the personal debt. So it literally fell on my shoulder. So I had to go and file bankruptcy. And so it was a total death of every identity of my beautiful mind, from physical death of the shoulder, financial death of bankruptcy, actual death of my business and my relationship to it, because of the bankruptcy, I can't be affiliated financially with it. I can't have equity in it, even though it's still going. So all of that taken away from my mind so that I can step into my higher purpose and calling, which is the work I do now through HRV via regulating my nervous system. And how I have learned and experienced this educational simulation works is you go through things that are extremely challenging in your purpose so that you can go and talk to people and share the medicine and going. There's no way I could be doing what I'm doing with the people and the caliber of people I do it if I hadn't walked literally through the fire and walked the walk of regulating my nervous system, which I'm still doing through that, right? Because in this day and age, I think embodying and authenticity is so, so, so important. And so how can you actually, why would anybody listen to me if I didn't handle that situation the way I did, and I was still in a story about how did this happen to me and all the things, versus seeing the medicine in it and now going and hopefully supporting other entrepreneurs as they're approaching burnout or redline to get to a place of acceptance and changing the program in their mind before their body speaks as loud as it did through me and slaps them.
Yeah. Is a big part of this identity and reprogramming the stories that we're telling ourselves about our own life? Because for you there, right, being this big dog company, 9 years running all of this stuff, I can imagine that can play a big role of, this is my life, this is my identity, this is who I am, I run this company, we're doing this, this is our mission, and you form this identity. So to have that stripped away from you, and not only stripped away from you, left with your arm in a sling, not being able to move, and all the rest of the things that flow with that, a bit, you'd think that there'd be a level of an identity crisis that happens in that moment. Would you say that happened for you, or do you think you were already progressing so much further in terms of being in tune with who that is, the higher power, the calling that you're really truly here to do? Were you already in tune with that, or was it a bit of an identity crisis when you hit that?
Oh, it was an absolute identity crisis. And I had just started coaching at that time a little bit and was enjoying it, but I was still so attached to that version. I mean, people, oh, it's the sound guy. Oh, it's Salim. Like, it was literally my identity. I mean, when I moved to LA, that's what I was known for. And that happened so that I can fast and quickly move through that identity. Like my body, my higher self was just like, nope, we're not going to even linger in this. We are going to rip the Band-Aid off, because that is no longer your calling. You are now walking this path. And that doesn't mean that it was easy, but what I have learned and what I talk about is it's as easy or hard as you want it to be, truly, right? It's your relationship to it that makes it. And so if I'm going to sit here and talk to people about, step back, think, bring awareness to it. Is it hard? I need to actually embody and show that. And so this story very much resonates when I work with clients and when I talk to people. They're like, oh man, like that is not an easy thing. Yes, it wasn't easy at the time. And thankfully, because of my mentors, because of my coach at the time, because of all the things, I was able to move through it as elegantly as I needed to in that time. And to finish the story, so I think you're going to really like this, I ended up traveling and I went to Bali because I was called to Bali for so long. And every morning I would contemplate that statement, less doing, more being, right? Because that's why I was there. I asked for it. And I'd sit there and be like, yeah. And my mind would be like, but I love doing. I want to do. Like, I'm here to do. What do you do? What is being? No, we're here to do. Like the hustle grind New York in me like loves to do, right? And I know we talked about this the other day at dinner. Like it's so hard to turn that off, but it's not about turning it off. And I had this massive epiphany one morning while I was contemplating this, that statement, less doing, more being, is mind-made and dualistic in nature and implies that doing and being are mutually exclusive. But the reality is we're always being, even if we're unaware of it 99% of the time, and we're always doing, even if we're sitting or sleeping or breathing, right? So it's actually not about doing less and being more. Only thing that actually matters is the intention in the doing. The why behind your doing is what matters more than anything. And it reminds me of my favorite quote from the Bhagavad Gita, which states, "You have a right to your actions, but never the fruits of your actions. Act solely for the action's sake and don't be attached to inaction." And if we break down that quote, you have a right to your actions. You have a right to act. We all came here to do. You don't have a right to the fruits of those actions, to your expectations, right? That's what leads to all suffering. This idea like, I'm doing this needs to happen, right? And the reality is the mind and what it thinks needs to happen, it pales in comparison to what actually could happen because you're putting it in a box. Act solely for the action's sake. Act solely for your intention with no attachment and allow it to be whatever it needs to be. And don't be attached to inaction, meaning don't do nothing. We didn't come here to do nothing. And when I realized that, it was like a rebirth because my mind was like, oh, I could still be out here doing what I want to do as long as I'm super cognizant of my intention, of my why behind the doing, which is why I believe having a purpose and contemplating what your purpose is and what your why is so important. And it's one of the foundations of my work with clients, because if HRV is measuring your relationship to your reality, to your story, in order to actually measure that, you need to have a map or some sort of guidance to what you want that story to be. And HRV is a direct reflection of how aligned you are with your story. But you need to know what is your why. And again, most of us are running on a program in the mind of a prior why, even though we have evolved and we're not that younger version of us.
And that's the identity piece. I'm going to try and unpack this in the simplest way as I possibly can. This is awesome. So the being and the doing, right? The being is the identity. The doing is the action.
The being is our essence. It's impossible not to be.
And so, but however we're being is a reflection of how we're identifying ourself and our environment and life as a whole, in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. That's how we're showing up. That's how we're being.
Totally.
So the being's the identity. The doing is the action. They don't have to, you have both at the same time.
They're always happening.
Yeah.
In every moment.
Yeah.
No matter what. You're always being and emitting you, no matter what. And you're always doing, even if you are sleeping.
Yeah. And then you've got this other component of you can control the action, but you can't control the outcome. So when you expect an outcome, you're basically asking for disappointment or dissatisfaction in a sense, because anything that's not that outcome or your expectation, you're not going to be happy with because you've set the expectation. So you kind of, the best way I like to explain it is like when your expectation's here and your reality's here, the gap between that's disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
You set all these massive expectations on your life and your goals and all the things you're trying to achieve. And then when things don't go to plan, when most of the time it doesn't, you're guaranteed to be disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, if I'm looking at this and going, okay, this fluff word of happiness, but if we just use it for this example and go, I want to live a happier life, if that's a goal. The first step to that is probably removing the expectation, because when you have no expectations, everything becomes a bonus. And how good is it when we receive bonuses in our life?
It's the best. And I would just add to that, before even not having an expectation, define what happiness is for you. You need the roadmap. And that's what most people, they're going on a roadmap that they don't even remember anymore because they didn't stop and pause to contemplate the story that they are creating.
Yeah.
So to understand, and the roadmap is the intention, the why behind. So what is it that actually makes you happy? And understand what that is, and then set an intention to do that with no expectation of what that looks like. And the reality is, it's not only if you have an expectation here and you land here, it's disappointment. But what I have seen in myself and my clients is 99% of the time, the expectation that you have is subpar compared to what the universe has in store for you. Which is the craziest thing that you can't even imagine. But the mind is only projecting the expectation based off what it knows. But we know so little compared to what is out there.
Do you think that it's a silly place to be in if your if your goal is happiness though? Defining happiness is an interesting thing in itself because there's no happy without sad. So if we define what our version of happiness looks like, we could probably slip down a slippery slope of now expecting that because we've identified what it looks like. But the only way we can have a happy emotion is to have experienced a sad, because that's the comparison point.
And that is the pendulum of a dualistic world. And Khalil Gibran, one of my favorite poets, has this chapter in The Prophet on joy and sorrow. And you're always swinging between the two. And the deeper the sorrow, the greater the joy on the other side. And the greater the joy means the deeper the sorrow. And how else can it be, right? And so that's why happy is a tricky word and a very triggering word for some people. So you got to be super cognizant of how you're using it. But what I would say is that the sadness, embracing the sadness and having a relationship with it of positivity is where the magic comes, because then you realize, like for me, oh, my dislocated shoulder, my bankruptcy, let me embrace that because I trust that this is happening for me, instead of staying in the story of, oh my God, what am I going to do? Bankrupt. Like if you saw my mom, when she found out all the projections of everybody outside, like, oh, you're going to be okay. And the reality is, of course I'm going to be okay. Like I trust this is happening for me. So fully embracing the full spectrum of emotions and feelings, especially around that word happiness and sadness. So that's a great point.
Yep. And how exciting is it when you can embody that, what you just explained? So then when you get presented with a low time, you can realize that it's only going to make the highs higher. How exciting is that frame when we can reframe and just zoom out a bit and realize that our pattern is that the lower the times we go through, they're the most life-changing. We can go through those low times easier because we realize that that is going to change our life for the better. The pendulum's swinging back the other way.
Always. And I bet you if you were to audit all of your low times in your life, right? And I do this with clients sometimes, audit like the most challenging thing that happened to you. When you zoom out, if you look at what happened on the other side, it usually coincides with the best thing that happened to you. Always, always. And if it hasn't happened, give it some more time, because that's how it works. And Buddhism has this incredible analogy of like an experience as a circle, right? And if you're at any point on that circle and you're in the circle, you can get very stressed about what is happening. But if you actually know how the circle ends and you're at a point, you're like, oh, okay, this thing happened, but I know how the circle ends. Why am I even stressing? I already know where this is going, right? Because you know the full cycle of the experience. If you look at any experience at the full cycle of it, it always ends exactly where you need to be. And the reality is, when we zoom out enough, we know our circle of life. We're in a borrowed body, right? It is over time going to decay, age, and eventually pass on, right? So knowing that, sometimes it's just silly. We're so in a circle, we don't zoom out enough.
You just need to zoom out enough. Borrowed body. I've got something else I want to talk about before diving into that. That's fascinating. You mentioned in that time where you had the dislocated shoulder, the bankruptcy, you had the people around you stressing and freaking out. Mum, oh my God, what's going to happen? X, Y, and Z. I can imagine and I can relate to that. And I feel like a lot of people will. In times like those, is your natural inclination to want to kind of experience solitude and not have to explain yourself, speak to those people because they're making it harder, because they're inflicting more stress in a sense? Is your natural inclination to maybe run away in a sense? Because that's something that I feel I struggle at times when doing something so unique and making decisions for me, or when things be presented or happen in my life that potentially aren't part of the script. I tend to want to be alone because I don't want to have to explain myself. I don't want to have more worry get presented to me or feel a certain way based on how someone else is feeling. So I just isolate. Did you feel that?
Absolutely at times. And that was the medicine that I needed, because that comes from a belief that I need validation from people outside and I need everybody to understand what I'm doing. And if I actually need anybody outside of me to understand what I'm doing, then I need to be super cognizant of the why behind that, because the reality is this is I believe, an educational simulation, and everything we are seeing is a mirror. So why does it matter to the person outside what I am doing if I know my intention, if I know my why? And the word that I like to use to describe this, which came from my last mentor, Michaela Grace, is this word impervious. Have you heard of this word?
I've not.
Impervious means if you are so impervious, nothing outside of you can knock you. No wind, no projection, no nothing, because you are so solid in who you are. You are so solid in what you're for that you don't need to explain yourself to anybody, because you know your why.
And you don't need to run away.
And you don't need to run away, right? And so for me, because of my internal belief of needing to support, needing the validation, I was so seeking all the love from the outside. It was such a beautiful challenge during that time to realize that their projection was my medicine to sit and look and be like, it's going to be okay. Like, I know what I'm doing. And she did very quickly. She was great. And all my friends, everybody was really great, but it definitely was very triggering at first. And I have learned anytime I feel something that triggers me, anytime something like that happens, and we talked about it a bit, I would so recommend it. The next morning in my practice, I go and I sit and I contemplate that. And I feel inside where that is, because that trigger is actually just a stuck emotion of a scalar wave inside of me, to allow that glacier to melt, to then have a different perspective of what is happening.
But their surety comes from your surety, because what you're saying there about how your mum and your friends, they came around. If you're in this state of worry, it's all turning to shit, this isn't meant to be, they're probably going to begin to worry even more. But if you walk in there with your head held high and you truly mean the things that you're saying, Mum, it's all going to be all good, this is all meant to be, she'll be able to have that bit of a deeper breath and go, okay, everything's actually all good. But because you're sure, that's the only way she can be sure. Because I think at the end of the day, these people that are worrying for you, they are doing it out of the love of their heart.
100%.
They care about you. They want the best for you. And most of the time what they think is best for you is not best for you, because they don't understand you the way that you can understand you if you dive deep enough. But at the end of the day, it all comes from love and care. They all want you to do the best. And so being able to reflect that everything is good and truly mean it, that energy in itself will then reinforce them that everything's going to be all good. I don't need to stress. I don't need to worry.
Totally. And Chris, one layer deeper that I have started to step into, because again, your parents, your siblings, your family is usually your biggest triggers and your best medicine, is to not only embody that to them, but then to fully accept and appreciate and love what they are projecting on in terms of that. Like, even though
regardless if it's in agreement.
Totally. Be like, I get what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Thank you. I love you for saying that. This is me. I'm going to hold you while you say that and be okay with you saying that and not be like, no, that's wrong and all the things, right? So to be able to hold and fully accept, even though there is a disagreement, but to fully accept then is the ultimate growth to move through the whole reason it's happening, which is my belief that I need my mom to understand so I could receive love, that I need my siblings, that I need my friends, right? And so that's how you move that stuck emotion in you, by looking at it in the entire geometry.
Yeah. So with all of that said, then a feeling that I'm experiencing of wanting to potentially run away, not explain myself, is a reflection of potentially I'm seeking external validation to validate myself, and potentially because I'm not, I don't know, maybe some of the emotions that I'm feeling are a bit more challenging. I don't want that to rub off in the way they're perceiving me. Maybe I'm searching for external validation. And with my mentor, I'm working one-on-one with now, Jim Fortin, where I'm unpacking this a lot about like, what is this thing that is driving me to show up as perfect all the time? What are the things that are making me seek, like, why am I making all of my decisions based on the premise of what other people are going to think or perceive, as opposed to the things that I truly want to do? And a lot of the time, those things don't look like they're on the surface that you're doing them for external validation, but deep down you are. And
only you know the answer to that.
Yeah. And yes. And perhaps this is a new concept for me, is when you are running away, that's because you're not running away from having to explain yourself. You're running away from having a negative perception on you based on what you're going through. This is quite profound.
Ooh, you are, yeah, moving. I love it.
I'm
seeing it click.
I posted this on my Instagram story last night. It was a thought. I wrote it. It was in my night thoughts thing, and I wrote it in the sauna. And I'll read it to you.
Please.
We may as well read it right now, because this is quite relevant to this. I said, there's a certain kind of loneliness that comes with choosing a path most people don't understand. When you start doing things for you, not for validation, not for applause, not for fitting in, the crowd around you starts to thin. You stop relating to surface level conversations. You struggle to explain what's really going on. Not because you don't want to be honest, but because explaining it feels heavier than carrying it. So you hold it. You smile. You say all good when it's not. Not because you're pretending, but because sometimes you just don't have the words yet. Sometimes it feels safer to grow in silence than explain the storm you're still standing in. On the journey to something great, you learn that not being understood is part of the process. And maybe, just maybe, what feels like isolation is actually evolution.
Oh, wow. That is beautiful. You wrote that last night?
Yeah, 7:35 p.m. before bed. And some of it is great. I do agree with some of it. But what I'm questioning here is this loneliness and feeling of isolation is self-inflicted as well. You're choosing the path that is more unique to you, which results in a lack of connection to a lot of people. You struggle to relate. This is all on you. It's a path you've chosen to take on. But perhaps the feeling, the part explaining there of you feel like holding it is safer than actually sharing what you're going through, the storm that you're in. Perhaps that's just a form of seeking external validation, but in its indirect form, because you're isolating yourself to refrain from them externally thinking of you as a bad thing, which you don't want. That's quite profound that you've explained that to me, Salim.
Chris, yes, and it's quite profound what you just got this breakthrough. And I want to say you said leads to a lack of connection, right? That was the word that you used. And what I would reflect back is it's actually a perceived lack of connection to people around you that are dissonant with your current energetic field. And it will be an increased connection to where you're stepping into an evolution with the people that are in your energetic field, right? That doesn't mean the people that are dissonant are bad. They're just at a different frequency and vibration. This is an energetic world. It's all energy. And so you're 100% right that the loneliness is your mind attached to the people that have been around your life, because that's so much been the validation, the love, all the stories around them. But the reality is the mind doesn't realize the new connections that are going to come as you step up into this more authentic version. And there is no right or wrong which path you go, but it's always, you need to know your why. And as long as you connected to your why, then the right connections will come to you. So you're 1,000% with this epiphany of, wow, the loneliness is attached to your desire in the bubble that you have made of your beautiful life and everything that's happened to it, to not lose those people. But you can't be attached to losing them or not losing them. You need to just worry about your intention and what you're doing, and trust that the medicine for you and them will come, whether that is potentially losing them, whether that's a new relationship with them, whether that's them maybe stepping into and wanting to go wherever you're going. But that's not up to you to decide. And that was the hardest thing for me, especially around my family, because of how much love and everything, that I wanted everybody to feel what I'm feeling and see this and try this thing and do. And I was way too pushy at first, and at times still can be, because of how exciting and passionate I am about this. But what I have learned is the best way to allow people to experience what I am experiencing is embodying it, because this is an energetic world and they feel it more than anything.
Yep. And the best leaders in the world never drill down you what you should be doing. They lead by example.
Should, yeah.
And what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Because they're drilling down what you should be doing.
Yeah.
They lead by example in the way that serves them, and then people might see that, gravitate towards that, and then take a piece of that and use it for themselves. Most of the time, the best leaders do that because they're leading in a field that someone else is trying to become great at as well. So if you just focus on what you're doing and becoming the best version of you and doing the things that serve that soul-led version of you, then perhaps other people will be gravitating towards that. It's this interesting thing that I'm speaking to with my mentor at the moment is I'm searching for the validation. However, the way to get the ultimate amount of validation is by doing the thing that serves me, absolutely fucking crushing it. And then a byproduct of that is you will get validated. But if you're choosing your actions based on the premise of how you can get validated from those actions, you might get validated in the short term, but it's going to be in this loop of just ending up in the exact same place because you're not truly building something that's substantially good for you. And I think it's quite a profound thing to kind of understand and embody for me.
Yeah, for all of us, my friend, like we're all on that journey together, and that's an everyday journey. And for me, the best way that I can continue to try to embody is to connect with it every day, right? And that's why my non-negotiable is my morning practice, which could change and could be whatever form for whatever person, but at least to just sit and contemplate your story, contemplate your purpose, state your why, and audit if you are aligned with it or not. To do that on a daily basis gives you the best chance to embody it. Otherwise, we get in the story, we get in everyone else's story, and we just get lost.
How long does your morning routine take?
Oh man, it has evolved so much. It continues to evolve. When I first started and the whole shoulder thing happened and I had all the time in the world, I worked with my coach at the time, and it was about a 2-hour morning routine, like a very strict regimented, but I have since evolved it. And now it's as little as 15 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes, depending on the day. It's got a couple anchors in it. And it really depends on what my body wants and how I feel. But it is truly one of my, if not my favorite part of the day. Like when I wake up out of bed, I am excited to go and sit on my altar and to connect with that, because I know then I can carry that energy and that intention into everything I do. And it has just been so wild, this like surrender experiment type life that I've been living and what's unfolded and how I'm even in this room right now with you.
Yeah. See, I've spoken about this a couple of times, but Oprah Winfrey, Oprah Winfrey, she spends every morning sitting, just thinking and feeling, no book, no pen, no distractions, just sitting there doing nothing. And she might spend 5 minutes, she might spend an hour, however long she needs, but just thinking. And the word you're using is contemplating.
Same thing, contemplating, thinking, feeling, but that's very similar in my own version. And I think, and it's so much when I work with a client, that is like the foundation, that morning practice, offering them all different modalities and tools that I've learned to see what resonates with them. Because I don't think you should just do one box if someone says, oh, you should journal or you should meditate or you should do breathwork, because the most important thing is your relationship to this practice. You need to actually do it because you want to do it, not to go check off a box, because then you're missing the entire point of it. Because it always, always comes down to intention.
On this intention piece, one of the first things you said to me on our first call we ever had, which has stuck with me ever since, and you said the difference between drugs and medicine is intention. You've been referring to medicine and intention a lot throughout this conversation. What does that quote mean? The difference between drugs and medicine is intention.
Yeah, so we are in an era where psychedelics like psilocybin, like tryptamines, like LSD are getting a lot of research and buzz and becoming actually legal in America and different places, because the research around PTSD and around, mental instability are just profound, right? And they've always been classified, these things, as drugs, right? Mushrooms is a drug, which it can be. And it also clearly can be a medicine. And I think the difference in either it being a drug or a medicine is just your intention and why you're using it. If you're using it to disassociate, to get away, to escape, to suppress, that to me, in my truth, would be as a drug. If you are using this as a medicine to heal, to feel, to move through something, then it actually is a medicine, because all of these psychedelics, like psilocybin, are doing is they are allowing you to zoom out a little bit and contemplate and be aware of your story. A psychedelic is actually just slowing down your default mode network, your thinking brain, and getting you more in your body to feel. And so for me, and someone who has a very strong thinking engineering brain, these plant medicines have been incredible allies in my journey, with intention, in the right setting and in the right space, to really contemplate and audit my stories and my why.
And so you're saying these drugs, medicines, depending on what your intention is, they're allowing you to zoom out a little bit. You showed me at dinner the diagram on your phone, and it's got all these different shapes.
Metatron's cube.
I'll pop a photo. Metatron's cube.
Yeah.
I'll pop a photo up on the screen if you guys are watching this on Spotify or YouTube. And you said to obviously look at that and tell me what you see. Now, based on how, I'll let you answer how you would define that, but based on your consciousness or whatever it is, reflects how many shapes and how many different things you can see?
Yeah, so I learned this from Michaela Grace, my last mentor, but they've proven, first off, Dr. David Hawkins he calls it a scale of consciousness, where he has mapped out from the lowest consciousness, which is shame and guilt, to the highest of unconditional love and enlightenment. And depending on where you're at, in other words, what your base emotion is, you could see a different spectrum of light, because we as humans only see the tiniest sliver of what actually the light's. There's X-rays, infrared, all these different things out there, and we only see the tiniest band rate of color, right? And based on where we're at in our evolution, we have a wider lens to take in more light, to take in more geometry, right? Because the world is really light, sound, and information and geometry, right? There's an incredible book, Cosmometry, that really breaks down how from the micro all the way to the macro is only those things. So everything is sacred geometry. right? And so based on where you're at, when you look at this Metatron's cube, you can see different shapes from a circle or a square to a cube, a pyramid, a dodecahedron, all these different things in there based on where you're at.
Right. And you said that the less you can see in that diagram, the more the psychedelics would affect you?
No, I said depending on where you're at in your journey will impact what you can or what you can't see initially, right? Psychedelics simply, if done with intention, can support you processing and moving all those stuck emotions through you so that you can continue and evolve in your journey and get out of the current story that you're in.
Right. And so you're using psychedelics as a bit of a vehicle and a tool to help your clients kind of understand themselves better, would you say? Or how would you define the outcome that they're getting from doing these processes?
Yeah, I don't. So psychedelics is not necessarily a part of my protocol with clients. It's actually not even in it. If it's something they're intrigued in, I support and guide them to trusted facilitators that I have used in the past if they're intrigued in. That's not something necessarily that I do.
Right.
But just speaking from my own personal experience and using it, it was profound in getting out of my mind and my story and into my body. Right.
Yeah, cool. It's just an interesting thing because obviously look, in Australia, it's a lot more strict when the legalities are a lot different and stuff than they are in America. But it's just fascinating to see the intention and being able to pivot the way you're viewing things and deeming things as bad and good and obviously drugs or medicine being one of those things is quite a touchy subject because you've got so many different narratives around the thing. But what I think is what's profound about your message and what we're talking about just then is the fact that it can be a drug, it can be a medicine. It depends on your intention with the thing. If you're escaping your reality, if you're using it as a vehicle to numb yourself, then it's probably a drug rather than a medicine, which is crazy. And for you, obviously, HRV is the focus. Now, you might have noticed we're like an hour and 40 in or whatever, and
I love this.
I've not brought up HRV once in the convo. Only reason for that is because you're that HRV guy. There's so much stuff of you talking about HRV online. But now I think it's important that we can dive into this a little bit more because I want to relate it back to the central nervous system and how obviously the work that you're doing is central nervous system related, helping people regulate their central nervous system more. And help me understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're using the metric of HRV as a great indicator to how regulated your nervous system is.
Yeah, HRV is a direct reflection of your nervous system's agility to go from a sympathetic fight or flight state into a parasympathetic rest and digest state. And at the end of the day, I believe we have no control over what's happening out here. We only have control over how we react to what's happening out here. And again, if you're in your limbic sympathetic fight or flight state, you have no access to your frontal cortex and anything you've learned and all your memory and all the things. So you actually can't control your reaction because you're firing off back here, right? So my goal with any client is to optimize their HRV, but really get them to start to learn how to relate to their story in a way that they want to, right? And what I have found and for myself and in workshops that I've done here in Australia and Melbourne and just my clients is that all HRV is doing is giving you data. It's giving you data on what your body is resonant with and what it's dissonant with. What you choose to do with that data is always totally up to you, right? But at least you're getting the data to know what it is, whether you want to stay in a mind program or evolve into what your body wants. There is no right or wrong answer to it. And again, like Bowser, you have 100 lives to keep on trying and trying. And it's literally, it gives the power back to you. And if you use it like that, like a biofeedback loop, it can really support people on their journey.
Right. So how you're explaining earlier in the conversation about the bank or the thing where they have the walls that close
The
as
hospital.
the hospital as a protection mechanism, and how our brains do the same. When we can have a regulated HRV, might be the right word, or a malleable HRV.
A malleable nervous system, which is indicated by a higher HRV.
Right. So a malleable nervous system, we can kind of shut and open that more quickly. Is that what that would be doing?
We can get out of that fail-safe shut open and into our frontal cortex, where we can actually think on our own rather than react from a past experience.
Right.
And the best example of that, I've worked with athletes, and then I'm starting to potentially work with a big sports agency, because they came to me, they realized that every one of their Hall of Fame legendary athletes are incredible, physically fit, shape, but the ones that were like the Hall of Fame peak performers all had much higher HRV scores than the rest of the athletes. They came to me and asked why. And it makes so much sense. Michael Jordan approaching Game 7 finals free throw, right? Everybody's looking at that like, oh my God, how stressed can he be? Like, that's the most stressful thing. Everything's on the line, all the things. But a Michael Jordan, a Kobe Bryant, a Derek Jeter, these people, they look cool as calm, right? Like nothing, because they are not in their limbic autonomic state. If they were, guess what? They're going to miss the free throw, because even though they tried it, they have that muscle memory of 1 trillion free throw shots, they don't have access to it because they're in their limbic. But because they are able to regulate, to get out of what everybody's projecting as this Game 7 final thing and realize, actually, this is all just a simulation. I am just stepping to something that I have done 1 trillion times. I'm going to get out of my limbic into my frontal muscle memory and just hit the shot. And they hit the shot like it's nothing, right? If you notice any Hall of Famers, like, oh, that was with ease. They weren't stressed. That's because it is the key. How you regulate your nervous system and your agility to get out of this and into here is what makes or breaks athletes. And business professionals, right? You can't logically come to an answer or a conclusion or a collaborated agreement if you are in a fight or flight, like angry, emotional state with the person that you're talking to. But if you can calm down, get your body in a parasympathetic state, you could actually see a wider geometry. You could see more, you could listen, and you could come to a collaborative approach because you're using your frontal cortex.
So with this though, the term I'm sensing here is like ability to be calm in the chaos, in a sense, right? I would say that that's a very attractive trait in people, in an athlete, in a business person, whoever you are, ability to be calm in the chaos. My initial thought though is the only way to become calm in the chaos is you need to go through more chaos so the chaos doesn't phase you anymore and you can be calm in that chaos. This is my thought. But if we're applying this to HRV, can we increase our HRV and regulate our nervous system more without going through chaos and then still achieve the same result and outcome of having a more regulated nervous system, being able to be calm in the chaos? Or is a byproduct of going through more chaos and overcoming it, is a byproduct of that an increased HRV and a more regulated nervous system?
Yes and yes. So yes, a byproduct of going through chaos is, if you can regulate it, a more regulated nervous system.
If you can regulate it.
And you could look at my example of the chaos I went through. And what is your definition of chaos? Because I say that your definition may be redlining in business. A mom's definition may be children and work. It's all
relative.
Your relationship to the chaos. And I promise you, every single human being wakes up and they are putting themselves in some sort of stressful situation, right? So the beauty is we're already doing half the battle to improve your HRV. Most people, myself included, was very guilty with the other half, right? Hermetic stress. Put yourself in a perceived stressful situation and then consciously, not at night, but during the day, drop out of it. And so I know we talked about this the other day at dinner, but you don't actually need to redline and go through what I went through in business to regulate your nervous system. You could do that in a hot plunge sauna, cold. You could do that with breathwork. Let me tell you, I've been doing this breathwork with an incredible friend, Rodo and Alchemy Wire. and you go free diving, you watch your nervous system jack up just by staying underwater, right? In breath holds. You think your nervous system doesn't get irritated and go into a high sympathetic state when you're doing a breath hold on an exhale for 2 minutes? What starts to happen? That is the same thing as redlining at work. The body doesn't know the difference. So you don't necessarily need to go do it in the business world to get there. If you want to, amazing, but no, it's always your relationship to it that defines it. So just be super cognizant of that chaos.
Yeah, but then that comes down to this chaos being relevant to wherever you're in. That's why a baby's going through chaos when it's served strawberry ice cream instead of vanilla when it wanted vanilla ice cream. The baby's going through chaos in that moment. It doesn't know any different. That's chaos, and that's their definition and their relationship to chaos. And so the only thing that I would just think of on top of this is that's why we can be more calm when we go through chaos, but it doesn't matter what the chaos looks like. I think it's just the fact that there's a progression of chaos. And I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about this as we're talking, and you said it can be in the vehicle of business. You can go through the chaos. You can go through it in whatever way. I would say that business, though, is probably a way to fast track the amount of chaos that you're being presented with, depending on the business, of course. But like going through certain levels of business and investors and having, walking into boardrooms when you're in the red and you've got to make it out to all these investors that know everything's going to be all good. And then you've got to then close that door and walk back, and your partner's just been waiting for you all day to come back home. And you've got to say to them, when she says, "How's your day today, babe?" You've got to kind of not say that it was too chaos so she doesn't freak out and have a shit night and can't sleep. And then you've got to kind of go to bed and then wake up and do it all again. And then it's in payday for your employees. And all of this could be quite an extreme level of chaos. So then when you're presented with someone else's version of chaos, it doesn't faze you. I think such an attractive trait in my context in a man is ability to be calm. And I feel like when I look at my life and the things that has made me the most calm, it's been all those chaos moments when we've had investors on board, when we've lost their money, and when we've, it's not been like when I get an injury in sport or something like this. There's been so much more deeper challenges that I've been through that have resulted in me being able to, be less chaos in a sense. Mm-hmm. So I think you don't have to go through the journey of business to become calm or whatever, but I feel like the more challenge that you're presented with, whether it's presented to you without your choice or self-inflicted, it's kind of like that's the only way. And that's why you see military people that have been on the front line, the calmest people you've ever met. They've been dodging bullets.
Totally. And it all boils down to your relationship with that chaos. And what I'd say for you, because I was reflecting on it after our dinner and I just got a big hit as you were sharing that, is always the thing that you are here to do in the world and share with the world is the thing that you need the most, your soul needs the most. And always that thing that your soul needs the most, you will be tested on in chaos more than anything. And it's so clear with this podcast, with the work that you are doing, that your chaos needed to be and needs to be everything you just so beautifully described, very similar to mine, to impact the people that we are here to impact too. Because how else would it be if they are going to actually feel and resonate with what you're saying? Those particular kind of people, they need to know you've been on the journey yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it makes so much sense as someone who has been through similar chaos that we are sitting here and we're both in our respective fields and putting out our gifts into the world because we went through that chaos. And the beauty comes when you flip that perspective and realize that the chaos is the beauty. The chaos is the fun if you make it fun, if you change your relationship to it to be like, oh, I'm sitting here training. This is happening. So then I could go share with people so that they don't have as much chaos as I had. And that's my gift.
And you know what? The answer to have a relationship to the chaos that is fun is by going through more chaos.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because for me, I you can say that and be like, oh, yeah, just change your relationship to chaos that it's fun and you'll have fun. If you've not been through much chaos, the chaos isn't very fun. But when you've been slammed in your face so many times, when you get presented with another challenge, this is just speaking personally here, I just laugh. I'm like, yeah, cool, let's go. Invite it on. It's all meant to be. And you can kind of have a good relationship with it. But for me, it's earned through the challenge.
Totally. And the only thing I would caution you from my own experience is always to audit your intention behind why you're going through the chaos. Because for me, I suppressed so long thinking, oh yeah, more chaos, I could handle this. And I was still doing it.
Externally.
Yeah. And when I made that change, oh my God, how then the relationship and joy to the chaos grew even more to handle more, right? So,
yes.
So super, super cognizant of your intention. Why? Yeah. And I just saw that light up in you.
And when you're thinking about this, and this is stuff I've been working with my mentor is he asked me the question to reflect on. He said, ask yourself this. What is the reason that I'm wanting to be a plate spinner? And the example he uses, like, I'm spinning all these plates, doing all of these things. And he's asking this question of like, why do you keep ending up in this position where you're spinning all these plates? Why do you want to be a plate spinner? And when you actually dig deep, which is quite chaos, you're spinning all these plates, you're trying to do all of these different things. If you think about it, okay, then you get a call from your mom or your dad and they go, oh, how are you going? Oh, flat out. Perceived as busy, doing well, successful. I'm busy. I'm chasing my dreams. Whereas if I was being strategic with my time and my energy and I was going all in on the things that light me up, the things that are getting me closer to that dream that I really want, that my soul desires, potentially that might be a more not smooth sailing day, but less jumping around day and a bit more less fancy to talk about. And so maybe I'm ending up in this plate spinning nature because of external validation again, you know? I want to ask you, I want to change the topic just a little bit and selfishly ask you a bit about numbness. And it's been this weird feeling of feeling a level of numb, like when something good happens, I'm not too ecstatic about it. When something bad happens, I'm not too phased about it at all. And it's kind of just like, And I was thinking about this and I put a story up on my Instagram just to be open and share how I was feeling. And so many people were sending different thoughts and opinions and it was really fascinating getting insight. But one thing that stung with me was you're not feeling numb because you're not feeling anything. You're feeling numb because you're feeling so many things, too many things, that you're just going numb. It's a bit too much. I think because I'm moving to the States and all these things are happening and there's really good successes going on in business. There's also challenges happening. All of this stuff is hitting me. And then the result is like, I get to the end of my days, there's no more distractions. When I assess, okay, how am I feeling? I just feel, Have you worked with people that have kind of ended up in that position? And has there been any things that you've kind of helped them with?
Yeah. First off, thank you for vulnerably and truthfully sharing that. That's beautiful. And your awareness around it is unbelievable. And yeah, I've had a few clients who have had similar experiences. And what really supported them was first, acknowledging it like you did. And then second, really drilling down into their purpose and their why they're doing the thing. Because the theme that happened with each of them was that their initial answer was like, I don't even like the word purpose. I don't need a purpose. I have everything. Now I'm just numb. It doesn't matter how good it is or how bad it is. I'm just whatever, which I think is good. I'm not stressed about it. I'm not stressed on things that are too bad. I'm not stressed on things that are too good. I'm here. And what they were doing, again, I don't know if this is you, was they were suppressing the feelings of both sides and running on a story that, again, was a prior version of them. And so what I would recommend and offer onto you is to really sit and feel, because you are doing so much right now in terms of work and everything happening and moving. Really drill down into what is your intention and purpose in what you're doing, because as soon as you understand that, then that feeling of numbness changes because your relationship to what you're doing and all the good things and the bad things that are happening change with that. And then you can start to feel again. But you need to know your why in order to feel. Otherwise, you're inundated, especially in today's modern day, with so much information and so much things happening, good things, bad things, that your body is just exhausted and doesn't want to feel any of it. And so literally suppresses and numbs it, right? And there's a fine, delicate balance between accepting and not reacting to the good and bad, which is majestic. Something you said earlier, don't drown in the too bad. The actual harder thing for most people is not to be in so much of the high when it's so high, and you should experience both. But there's actually how much you stay in the story and be very aware of it and feel and really feel it. And in order to do that, you need to know your why and your intention.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I feel like this numbness thing, like when I put that on my story, the amount of people relating to it, I didn't think it was a common problem. I honestly was like, okay, I haven't actually had many people speak about this. I'm just going to write how I'm feeling. I don't think anyone will relate. I wasn't even going to post it. And then I posted it, and next minute, all these people relating. And it just got me thinking around where the numbness stems from. And what I realized again, and this is the relationship to it in reflection after this conversation, when I would ask other people, all of their reasons were so different to mine. Everyone's was so different. And I think everyone's feeling of loneliness is probably different when they feel that. Everyone's feeling of numbness is their own version of that. And yeah.
I'm curious. So when you say numbness, what is it exactly that you feel when you're at night at home after a day and you say you feel like numbness? What is the exact feeling?
Yeah, this is my little challenge, is actually understanding what the feeling is. Because I sit there and sometimes I'll just not have a lot to feel. And that's the thing. A part of that story I posted was I don't actually really know. I'm normally good at explaining things. And I think that's why this show does well, because someone can say something and I can kind of unpack it and explain it. But this one thing, I really struggled to explain. And where it stemmed from on the notes, I wonder if I can find it. Where it stemmed from on the notes was I wrote something that I could write about for ages. And then I was writing something about how I could speak about that for ages. And then I was like, I got to the end of it. I was lying in bed. This was at 9:30 p.m. I found it. And I was lying in bed and I was like, oh, let's just do a little bit of journaling. Let's just write a bit. And I started writing about something that's just like a topic I'm passionate about. And I finished this massive note and I just sat there. I put my phone down and I went, did I just avoid actually checking in on myself? Did I actually avoid what could be quite profound about doing a journal session right now? And the answer was yes. So then the thing I wrote on the top of the note was, how am I feeling? Let's read it. Why not? I said, this is the second note I've wrote tonight. I started writing about a topic that is easy for me to write about, then finished it and realized I haven't checked in on myself. So here we are. If I'm honest with myself, I feel a little bit numb to the success, numb to the accolades, numb to my days. And I don't mean I'm an emotionless wreck. What I feel is a series of highs and lows. However, my default just appears to be numb. I get to the end of the day and I don't feel much. I don't know what it's stemming from. I guess there's a level of uncertainty in my life right now, which can be a massive contributor. Life is so good, but I'm packing it all up, selling everything I own and moving to the other side of the world alone. Is there doubt? Certainly. Is there stress and anxiety? Certainly. Do I complain about it or dwell in it? No. I just feel numb to it all. I don't know how to explain it. I really don't. Life is so good right now, yet there's a part of me that just feels a little empty. I'm inviting it all in though. It's all part of it. Discipline isn't a problem. I've been following through on everything I set out to do and I'm progressing rapidly. Just so that I would share a little update with you all. I'm off to sleep.
Wow. So much beauty in that reflection. And it sounds like to me, this new chapter you're going into is gonna, I feel, very much help unpack the numbness. But speaking from my experience and some clients' experiences, numbness comes from not settling, what's the right word? From just being so used to the same thing over and over that you forget how to actually like feel, and you're just stuck in this story and loop over and over and over again. And it makes sense why you went to write a journal entry. You got lost in the whole journal entry and you're like, wait, how am I feeling? Because the mind will always go to its habit and the thing that it's easiest, whereas the body wants you to feel, but you just go right to the mind and express and get out the thing that you know to not feel the thing that the mind actually wants. But what I would say is that journal entry is you feeling. Everything you shared in there is what's happening that you are now calling numb. But I think the numbness for you is this knowing that there is something greater, which is why you're being so bold and inspiring and you're packing up all your things and moving to the other side of the world and open to receiving whatever comes with no expectation. So I think you're in a great place, and the numbness is part of the journey for this next chapter for you is what I would say.
Yeah, it's exciting. I invite it all in. Just as we wrap up this, I do want to touch on this HRV piece so people can feel, I really
talk about what
I know what I really want to do is I want to be able to have something actionable for people to actually understand this really ambiguous number that is on people's Whoop screens. Because we go on the Whoop, we see the HRV, we compare to other people, we think a high number is good, but we don't actually really know what it means. When someone asks us, what is the HRV thing? We go, I don't really know. Apparently it's good for cardiovascular indications, all this stuff.
Yep.
So someone's got their Whoop, which if you haven't, get a Whoop, go to join.whoop.com/Chris and you can get a free month. Quick plug.
Love it.
But if they're looking at this HRV score, what does it actually mean? And how can they use that to better the way they're feeling, to regulate their central nervous system? And I feel like if we can close out this conversation with a bit of a high on how they can actually action this, I feel like it'll be very helpful.
100%. And I think this whole conversation has been a very much high. And I've never done a podcast almost backwards, but it's actually forwards, because now everything we're about to say on HRV is so tied in
tying it all
to
in.
Everything. So thank you for this journey and your thoughtfulness.
I've loved this, by the way.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Oh man. So HRV, heart rate variability, is measuring the gap or variance between each of those beats, which is usually measured in milliseconds. And what your Whoop is measuring, or your Oura Ring or the other wearable, is your average nightly HRV, meaning the average gap between every heartbeat throughout the entire night. Because your HRV score changes 40 to 60 times a minute, right? If your heart beats 40 to 60 times a minute, between each beat, there is a variability, right? So your real-time HRV is always going to change, and not as important as what I say your baseline is. And I define again baseline as your average nightly HRV score over the last 30 days. And that's giving you a good snapshot of the overall health of your nervous system. And how I utilize HRV, and what I'm here to hopefully support others in understanding it as a language in which your nervous system, through that gap between each of your heartbeats, is telling you how it's feeling. And when you think of language, you don't think English is better than French, is better than Arabic, is better than Spanish, right? The intent of a language is for an ecosystem within a community to communicate. The sole intent of your HRV is for your nervous system and body to communicate only with you. And so it is very hard in our culture, and trust me, I was the most guilty of it, to come to this place where, unlike any other biomarker, you need to throw out any range, you need to throw out any competition, you need to throw anything out against anybody outside of you. Because the second you do that, you actually are leading into your next bad score. Because if it's a measure of how you're perceiving your reality, and let's say you have a score of 30 and your buddy has a score of 50, and you're like, oh man, I'm not doing enough, I'm not good enough. What is the talk track that you're saying? You're saying right there, right? So only compare yourself to your yesterday's you and to your baseline. And so how I like to utilize it and how I share with clients and people is, know your baseline. Let's say your baseline is 40. You wake up in the morning and your average nightly that day was 20. That's not good or bad. That's simply your nervous system saying whatever you did the day before was more of a load than it is used to. Honor it. Have a recover day. Do something that is a little more leisurely that your body enjoys rather than pushing it, because we, myself included, so guilty of going, optimizing and never stopping, right? And I should mention before even getting into this, the higher gap or variance between each of those beats indicates a more malleable and resilient heart to handle more of the ever-changing environment around us, right? So in general, you want the wider gap indicates a healthier nervous system and its agility to go from the sympathetic, parasympathetic. Whereas in contrast, a lower HRV, meaning a smaller gap between each heartbeats, indicates a more rigid, stressed nervous system. And the best analogy for that, if you've ever seen a movie with someone connected to a deathbed at a hospital, what do you hear on the heart monitor? And then they die, because that which is rigid breaks, right? So in general, you want more of a cap to be more malleable and adaptable, right? That being said, there is no range on HRV. You could Google, and I know Whoop has like the average, for age and for male and female, but that's only the average based on their customers, right? They're actually, unlike heart rate or any other biomarker, there is no range, because I believe there is no ceiling. And because just like there's no two fingerprints that are the same, there are no two heartbeats in the world that are the same. And someone's 30 HRV score could actually be a more regulated nervous system than someone's 150, right? So comparing is the last thing you want to do. Just look at your baseline and compare it to your day-to-day and use it as a language in how you want to operate. If you wake up, your baseline's 40 and you see a score of 60, that's your nervous system giving you permission to actually push it a little harder. Go do that harder workout at the gym, or more often than not, have the conversation you have been avoiding, or think of the thing that stresses you out. Because again, emotions move the needle more than anything. But when you utilize it like this, not calling it good or bad, but just actually listening, then you're now developing a dialogue with the most intricate, intelligent piece of technology on this planet, your body. And that way you can go and experiment with all the biohacks and see what is resonant and what is dissonant. And just so you know, in order to get the baseline to go up, you need to go down. In order to go up, you got to go down first. That's how it works. You need to stretch it. You need to work it out. So I talk about the three biggest things that, if practiced in your unique way, can improve your HRV, because again, how I do something may have the opposite effect of how you do something based on how you perceive it. But in general, these pillars are massive. The first, sleep, right? Because again, autonomic nervous system, when you're sleeping, you're in your deepest delta parasympathetic state. And if HRV is a measure of your agility to go from sympathetic to parasympathetic, if you're not getting your deepest parasympathetic, it's going to be very hard to see that HRV go up. And the reality of sleep is really actually your body's natural circadian rhythm and that internal clock that governs so much of everything going on, right? So prioritizing sleep, absolutely crucial in whatever way that works for you. The second is hermetic stress, which is what we've talked about. So training your nervous system to get into stressful states, which is good news, all of us do, right? So we do have the battle, but then dropping it into that parasympathetic state during the day, not just at night. So what we did before this podcast, absolutely brilliant. You came in here, you said you were a little from the drive, from whatever happened earlier, you gave your body 7 minutes of a breath work that dropped you in a parasympathetic state. And now you're back up and you're in a sympathetic, not overly stressed, but we're just talking. It's that fluctuation that is so crucial for improving that HRV. And it's how I was able to get mine from 30 to 170 by intentionally putting myself in that stressful state of beverage, but then doing hyperbaric, doing sauna cold, doing meditation, doing breathwork, doing all these things, not just once at the end of the day, but throughout the day, and then going back into the stressful state and then dropping, right? To let my heart know and my nervous system know, no, it's okay. You could handle that, right? And then the third and final one, which is one of my favorites, is community and relationships, right? So important. Actually, one of my favorite TED Talks, The Longest Study in Human History. It's a 75-year Harvard study. And I cry every time I watch it, but they take, I think, 40 18-year-old boys from the Boston area and follow every aspect of their life, from jobs, medical records, spouses, children, everything. 3 generations of scientists, so much data looking for what leads to a longer, healthier, happier life. And after 75 years of countless studies and information, it came down to one thing, and it was relationships, and not quantity, quality, whether it's connection, whether it's with one spouse or a community or a church, or feeling like you are a part of something greater, right? And that winds back to the word we've talked about so much, your relationship with your story, your relationship with your life is what actually dictates your life. Because we are not just the actor in our play. We are the author, the director, the producer, the writer, and the audience of the stage play that we are projecting as our life. We are all of those roles, even though sometimes we don't remember it. And so it's your relationship to the story that actually makes your story.
I just want to commend you for everything, man. Like, what you're doing is so awesome. It's so inspiring. And I just think there's so much value, and it's a conversation that, at least in my world, and maybe a lot of people listening that have made it this far into this conversation and not sick of our voice just yet, hopefully they've got a new scope and a new profound thing in their toolkit that they can use. And I think I resonate with this approach of being able to, like, it starts with first, like, acknowledging it and being aware of it in the first place. And then that's when we can then look and take it to the next level. So thank you so much. And I'll leave all of your details in the show notes in the description below. So everyone can go and check you out, follow along and show some support on your end. And if you've made it this far to this podcast, screenshot this and post it on your story and tag us just to let us know you've made it to the end so we can personally thank you as well. But is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, anybody who has made it this far, thank you. And I'll leave you with one of my favorite support and allies on my journey. And I share with my clients all the time on this journey of life, which Chris, you so beautifully said, having awareness and contemplating, right? And auditing your story is super important. And when you do that, I bring these two allies, I call them. The first is curiosity, right? So just be curious as to why this thing triggered you or why this is happening, right? Ask the question to yourself and see what happens inside your mind when you answer. And then alongside the curiosity is levity, laughter, and compassion, because again, it's all happening because of that, hospital alarm from a prior story. So be kind to yourself, because we are usually our own toughest critics and our own biggest judges, right? And that's why I truly believe everybody is medicine for each other, because when we see someone outside of us doing something that we resonate with, we have so much more compassion to them when we see it in them over us. And that's why I truly believe we are all just mirrors walking each other home. And so when you bring that curiosity, that levity, that compassion with the awareness and the contemplation, really magic unfolds. So Chris, thank you so much for your journey, for creating something like this to share these kind of incredible topics that I know are impacting so many people, and for having me on the show. I look forward to hopefully doing it again sometime, and appreciate you, my brother.
Thank you so much. We're going to sign out for this week. Leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple, because it helps the show grow. It helps us keep getting awesome people just like Salim back on the show so we can all keep on growing together. We're going to sign out for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you so much, Salim. I appreciate you. And we'll see you guys very, very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.